I went from finishing 0 songs a year to writing and publishing over 70 songs in a year. And in this video, I'm going to share my 20 favorite tips to boost your music production creativity and productivity. Tip number one is setting a dedicated writing time. This could be as often as you want or as little as you want, but generally at least once a week is good. The thought process behind this is showing up whether you feel like it or not. So generating that creative energy instead of like waiting for it to strike. A good example is like electricity versus lightning. Like if your creativity is like lightning, you don't know when it's going to strike and you're just going to hope that you capture it when it does strike versus electricity, you flip a light switch and it's there. To me, that's the difference between generating creativity. So the idea is show up and make it happen. Also, remove the expectation of yourself to like, I have to make something in this time. No, you're just showing up and doing it. And if you don't write the next big hit in that 30 minutes you've set aside, that's okay. I think the common misconception is like you have to be a creative person or like, oh, I don't know how you write that much because I'm not that creative. It's not about creativity per se. That would be like originality, like, oh, you're not ripping anybody. But I think showing up, it's more of a dedicated practice, a habit rather than like, oh, that guy was born creative. So that's my thoughts on that. Tip number two is having some sort of dedicated space. That doesn't have to be an entire room or studio dedicated to it, but having a little desk with a chair that's like, this is where I sit to do music. And that kind of helps train your brain that, like, when I sit here, I'm doing music. And don't game there, don't read books there, don't do anything else in that little corner but do music. It's just this mental shift, this like brain training that helps your brain know like what to do in a certain space. I know it's weird, but that's what I do and it helps. Tip number three, and I know not everyone might be able to do this, but it's just leave your stuff set up, leave your gear plugged in and set up. And I know, if you're sharing a space with someone or doing it in a common area, you might not be able to do that. Another alternative is just plugging things in a little bit before your writing session. This just helps to get in the creative flow because like if your mic's not plugged in and you start writing and then you're like, oh, I need to record vocals, then suddenly you're breaking that mental focus, you're breaking that flow state to just like plug your stuff in. I know that might not sound important or impactful, but it really, at least for me, it really disrupts my flow when I have to like stop and do something else, if that makes sense. Number four is have accountability, either like a friend, a partner, a mentor, someone in your professional space that you can just check in with and who will check in with you to make sure you're hitting your writing goals. So I have a few friends that I'll text like throughout the week, like, hey, did you work on your music this week? Or we'll send each other music that we've worked on throughout the week. And that's a really great way to make sure you're on top of it because if you're alone and isolated, you have no one making sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. It's like a boss at work, like checking in on you, but in a very like friendly and creative way. So definitely look into that. That one's easy and free. I'm sure you have someone you can talk to about it. Just say, hey, hit me up like every Tuesday and see if I finished making beats or something. You'd be surprised how much that helps you. Like you don't want to disappoint your friend because you didn't write your music. So think about adding some accountability into your week on your music production. That's one that I've been focusing on lately and I really enjoy it. The next tip is called quantity equals quality. So I'm sure you've heard like quality is better than quantity. And while that's true, you're going to achieve higher quality faster if you focus on quantity. Like how many songs can I make? And just the full practice of doing the song is going to get you better. So the next time you do one's going to be slightly better. And the more you do that practice of like doing the song, finishing the song, and improving it, you're going to skyrocket your quality by focusing on quantity. The more you do the thing, the better you get at it, which will return you being better when you do the thing. I wrote, the more you do the thing, the better you get at it, which will in turn produce better songs. And I believe that 100%. Okay, my next tip is to learn the tools that you have. So that could be your DAW, your digital audio workstation, Logic or Pro Tools or Ableton. That could be your guitar rig setup. That could be all these plugins and sounds you have. Learn your library, all of that stuff. It's important to know the tools that you have at your disposal so that when you need a certain thing or a certain sound, you know very quickly where to get it, how to get it, what to do. Not having the knowledge is going to derail your creative process because then you're breaking that flow state to go try to figure out how to make your cowbell sound good. I don't know, there's a cowbell over there. Try to make that synth pad, try to make that cool keyboard sound. But if you already know the tools, like, oh, I'm going to go to Keyscape to get my key sounds, That's one less thing your brain has to focus on when you're trying to be creative. For me, it's about how many obstacles can I remove to make this like a smooth passageway, the 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 cave of creativity. Like how smooth can I make that passage through there? And another little tip along that note is try, if you're scheduling creative time, try either writing or learning during that time. Both of those are totally acceptable. Like, one is you're equipping yourself and learning how to do the tools or learning a new technique or that kind of thing. And the other is I'm actually applying it. But I do better when I separate those. So, like today, I'm just learning how to make better 808s. And then tomorrow, I'm actually writing and using my better 808s. But to me, having those things as separate times really helps. Number 7 is set the mood. So I'm talking candles, drinks, ow, banging your elbow on the desk, lights, whatever you have that like makes you tick, do that thing. So, if you love coffee, like if coffee makes you creative, then whenever you sit down to be creative, like have a cup of coffee. For me, it's lights. So I have all these lights around here, and sometimes I'll change the colors or do different things with them to set the mood that makes me feel most creative. So generally, like I like a clean white light, but if I'm getting into like some like Dark Knight, the Joker composing music, then I'll do like green and purple and like cool stuff like that. It's definitely way better than this thing. Hold on. It's definitely way better than these lights because this is terrible. I feel like I'm in a hospital or a school or like, those fluorescent lights that just give you a headache. That's what I feel like when my lighting's bad. So definitely, lights, coffee, drinks, whatever I need to is distracting me. See? It's already interrupting my creative flow. If this sounds like something that'll help you, try it. Try setting the mood before you go and write next time and see if that affects your creative flow. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but what does it hurt to try? My next tip is to use a reference, and I don't mean rip a song. I don't mean like pull up Harry Styles and like just copy it verbatim. I do like to drop a song into my session when I'm working that either has the sounds I want or has kind of the melodic chord progression or that kind of thing that I want. I very rarely try to hit both of those things because then you're getting into the territory of like I'm using their sounds and I'm using their arrangement and their chords and their melodies. But definitely, especially when you're learning, dropping stuff in there to hear new things, to make yourself approach things differently, I think that's a great idea and I would definitely recommend that. Here's another great tip for you, and it's not at your computer, it's not in your house, it's not, no, it's go out and exercise. Moving your body can help refuel your brain. I know when I get in my really kind of workaholic modes, I'm like, I have to sit in my studio for 10 hours and finish this. But really, going out and like taking a walk or like lifting some weights and taking a break is huge. And that actually helps me be more creative when it's time to finally come back in the studio. I started routinely working out probably like 2.5 years ago, and I noticed an immediate increase, like uptick in my creativity when I started doing that. And I think it's just because like I'm moving my body, I'm fueling my brain. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that one. Next tip, stop buying stuff. I have a few reasons for this. Number one, the first one is you cannot use lack of gear as an excuse for not writing something. We all have some sort of tools. I know there's exceptions, like you don't have anything, and that's fair. You can get GarageBand for free on your phone. That will cost you nothing. There's lots of free resources out there, but also I feel like people a lot of times they're like, "Oh, I'm not writing music because like I don't have a good vocal mic." Well, you don't need a good vocal mic to write music. You need to just be creative and do it with what you have. And as you go, you can upgrade your setup and slowly start to get more things that'll improve the quality. But again, it's the practice of just doing it that I feel is way more important. Also, on the other side of the coin, I'm super guilty of this, but I'll buy something when I'm feeling creative. Like I'm like, oh, I have a 4-hour block to write music. I'm feeling creative. I'm gonna get this new plugin. I'm laughing because it's true. And then I get the plugin and I spend like 4 hours just messing with the plugin, like, ooh, the presets and like all the little knobs and things. And then I finish the creative time and I'm like, yeah, I messed with the plugin, and you feel creatively satisfied, but you didn't actually do anything. You just played with a plugin for 4 hours. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. But if your intention is to like finish songs, like write music, be creative, try not to buy stuff. that kind of goes along with like learning the tools you have, but just the more I buy stuff, the less productive I am. I've noticed that for myself. Maybe that's not the case for you, and that's great. Love that for you. But for me, it definitely is a problem. What tip are we on? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, tip 11, keep it to yourself. So this weird thing happens in the brain when you talk about doing a thing. It like scratches that itch that you had for doing the thing. So if I post every day or tell all my friends every day, I'm going to write an album, I'm going to write an album, it's tricking my brain into not wanting to write the album. I don't know the actual science. I do music, I don't do brain stuff, but it's a thing. Dopamine, that's what it is. I see it in my notes. It also creates some public pressure to do the thing, which might not be good. Some people are different. Like I know some people enjoy the accountability of like, oh, I'm gonna write a song every week and put it on Instagram. And the people expecting that helps me to finish stuff. But for me, when I think about posting online more, it actually creates pressure, like bad pressure for me to do it. So I don't really talk about what I'm working on as much. Occasionally I'll post, but the point is consider keeping it to yourself. Number one, because of that dopamine release of talking about it. But two, you don't want to create extra pressure or expectation around this thing that you're just trying to creatively express yourself, if that makes sense. So, my very next tip is contradictory, very contradictory, but it's to share your work. So, if you've finished something you're proud of, like you've actually finished it, share it. Like it doesn't need to be published on like Spotify and everything. You put it on SoundCloud, you could just post it online, whatever you want. But to me, there's a satisfaction and a doneness, like an absolute stamp on like I'm finished when you put it out there. Because when it's sitting on your hard drive, you can get mad about the snare sound later and then like go back and keep mixing it. But once you like cut it loose and put it out there, you're not going to change it again. So, between those two tips, keeping it to yourself and sharing the stuff you finish, just do what's right for you. Just be a little intentional about that, I think is what I'm trying to say. And see what works for you. And this whole video is kind of advice buffet. So take what you like and don't take what you don't like. My next tip is to set goals for your writing. So this, I feel like everyone needs to do this. This could either be the time you put in, the output, like how many songs you finish, or both. So you could say, I'm going to do an hour a day, or I'm going to write one song a week, or I'm going to put in an hour a day and finish one song a week. Whatever your situation looks like, consider that. I think setting goals is huge because my personal goal is one song a week. That has definitely helped me because then if you look at a year, all right, that's 52 songs, one song a week, 52 weeks, but I actually ended up doing 70. So once that snowball, that motivation gets going, it goes, And I think a big part of that is just setting the goal, like I'm going to do one song a week, or show up 1 hour a week, whatever works for you. So tip number 14, I think, is eliminate bottlenecks. So anything that pulls you out of the creative flow, pay attention to it. That could be physical limitations, like I don't have a microphone, or like my window's right by the road and the car's going by distract me, or environmental distractions, personal things. Try to take a mental note of all those things that distract you and try to eliminate them slowly. It doesn't need to be all at once. You could say, sitting by the window is noisy, so I'm going to move to this other room where there's a quieter space. That's great. Whatever it is for your situation, I know everyone's different. All our setups are different and situations are different, but definitely focus on, if you realize something pulled you out of the creative zone, try to get rid of it. So for me, it's like when people come to the door, like solicitors, it really pulls me out of the creative flow. So I've just like stopped going to the door. At first I thought it was something important, but it never is. It's just like some guy wanting to trim the tree. Whatever the bottlenecks are in your situation, those things cramping your creative flow, just try to get rid of them if you can. Not always a possibility, but see if you can. My next tip is to practice each part of the process. So what that means is if you just like record stuff, that's great. You need to practice mixing and you need to practice editing your own vocals and you need to practice mastering. An issue I see a lot with people is where they're really good at like starting the song and not good at finishing the song. And although some of that is like a whole rabbit hole of like productivity and that kind of thing. Some of it is like you just don't know how to finish a song because you don't do it. So part of like trying to finish a certain number of songs is that you're getting equal practice all the way through. So, if I write an entire song, I'm getting practice writing it, composing it, whatever. I'm getting practice recording the instruments, engineering it. I'm getting practice mixing, and I'm getting practice mastering. And then, that's like one skill point for each one if you're a video game person. And then every week I do that, I'm practicing each little part of the process again and adding another little skill point to that category. And if you're not kind of growing equally, you're going to get in that situation where like I'm really good at composing songs, I'm okay at recording my own vocals, and I am terrible at mixing. And that's not really a position that I think people should end up in. And side note, if you are in that position and you want help with recording, mixing, mastering, Logic Pro, any sort of music production lessons like that, I offer that service and I have more information down in the description, but it'll let you book a one-on-one call with me and I can help you with just about whatever you need relating to music production and composing. So make sure to check that out if that's something you're interested in. I think I'm officially giving up on counting the numbers. I think we're on 16, but I'm not sure. But my next tip is to delegate the things you're not good at. So if you're not a bass player, find a bass player. If you're not a mixing engineer, that's okay. Just hire a mixing engineer. And it doesn't always have to be you're paying someone, right? If you have a friend who's like a phenomenal guitar player, and that's one of the things that you always get hung up on is like, I don't know what to do for guitars. See if that friend wants to write songs with you, because then you're both winning. He's getting whatever you do, and then you're getting great guitar parts, and you're both collaborating and finishing songs, which to me is one of the most important things. I used to get hung up on this spot so much, but it's like you finish a song, you want to put it on SoundCloud, and you need artwork. So if you're not a graphic designer, that's okay. There's AI tools, there's Canva, there's tons of different ways that you can generate your own artwork that aren't like learning Photoshop and becoming a graphic designer. So just look at things like that that you're not good at, that you don't necessarily have interest in being good at. I know I just said to get better at everything, but if there's just something that is like, no, this isn't working for me, see if you can delegate it. It's always worth a shot. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but collaboration is great. Hiring people if you really need to finish projects is a great way to do it. My next tip is the snowball effect, and this is going to happen kind of automatically as you finish songs. But if you say I'm going to do a song a week, and then after 5 weeks you're like, wow, I did 5 songs. Let's see if I can get to 10 songs. And then 5 more weeks go by, you have 10 songs, and you're like, man, I've never written 10 songs before in my life. Let me try for 20. And then and it just keeps going, and then all of a sudden it's like, man, I've done 50 songs. And once you start getting more and more songs that you've finished, like let that motivate you and fuel you and make you want to do it more. Sometimes finishing stuff is really hard and we have to take what motivation we can. So for me, I put them all on SoundCloud. I don't always publish them to public. I'll put them on private, but I'll get artwork and everything and put it with it just so I can go back and scroll through and be like, look at what I've done. And it's not like bragging too much as it is just like reflecting on what you've accomplished because you continued to show up. And I think that like little reward for your brain is really helpful to getting stuff done. My next tip is to take breaks. So this is speaking to all the fellow workaholics out there. If you're in a session for more than like, I think 2 hours probably is the max like healthy time, take a break, go for a walk, go sit outside, grab a glass of water, just stop for a second. I think we're definitely not made to be in constant creative output. And I think we can forget that a lot of times, especially when you're striving to constantly create. But there's definitely a balancing act of like, I'm putting in creative energy and I'm stopping to recharge myself. Because you can only go at that high output with no breaks for so long. Trust me, I've done it. I've burnt myself out. So don't do what I do. Don't do what I've done in the past and just work through without breaks. Take little breaks. If you're feeling tired, take a short, I'm talking like 15 minutes, like just take a little break, come back to it. Back on track with the numbering, I figured it out. Tip number 19 is get new experiences, like go experience things. This could be taking a huge vacation. This could just be trying something new, going on a day trip. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but sometimes a lack of creative output doesn't mean that you're not creative. I know like I've been in that boat before where I'm like, oh man, I wish I was more creative, or I wish I was a creative person. But actually, it's like, have you filled your own cup enough? Like, have you experienced enough to have that creative output? This could impact people at different levels. It might not be one to one for people, but think of it like driving your car without gas. Like the gas you put in your car is an experience, like getting out of the house and doing something. It doesn't need to be crazy. Like I said, you're filling up your car with gas and then you can go back to the studio and just drive it home. If you hit that wall where you're like, man, I'm just not creative anymore, stop trying to be creative and go do something else. Literally anything else. That one's definitely been a big deal for me, is trying to add experiences in that will also help boost my creative output. That's not why I do the experiences, but I've noticed, the more I do different things and kind of just honestly leave the house, the more my creative output is increased. My final tip, and this one's huge, I feel like everyone needs to hear this, is stop obsessing over the small details. I see people do this all the time, whether it's like arguing about conversion on audio interfaces, or like, should I EQ my tracks with a Neve or an API, or like, or like I got the wrong LUFS on my master, so it's trash. Or we've all heard those excuses. We've all made those excuses, but this borders on the realm of like perfectionism. Like, I'm not releasing it because it's not perfect, and that's a problem. So it's okay if the EQ is not perfect. It's okay if the vocal's not perfect. Finished is indefinitely better than perfect. There's no such thing as perfect, actually, if you're curious about that. And I can talk about this all day, and there's so many different ways to approach those small details. Like 80/20 principle is a great one. I know I've mentioned that before on an episode or video, whatever this is called. You can sit and obsess over a song infinitely, infinitely, every day for a year, and it'll never be perfect. So it needs to get to, it needs to be good. Like, you need to be pushing the envelope of the quality that you're producing. But at the end of the day, you need to get to a point where you're like, this is good enough, and send it on its way. And I don't mean cut corners. I don't mean like do a weak version of what you could do. Be wary of like, oh, I'm not sure if I should use Omnisphere or UAD Polymax for this, because I don't know just get something that works for whatever that thing is that you're hemming and hawing over, and call it what it is. Like, I don't know how else to say it, but stop obsessing over small details. That's all I have to say about that. I'd love to know, for all of you watching, what your favorite creativity hacks are, so be sure to let me know down in the comments. I read all of those and do my best to reply to what I can. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this video was helpful.